Okay, so it is 11 a.m. here in Toronto. Welcome to the PRC session on the new CIA exam and how to pass the new CIA exam. My name is Wada Halak. I'm the Business Development Director of PRC. I'll be walking you through today's presentation and hopefully we'll get you all the support you need, all the help you need, answer all the questions you have on how to get through this challenging exam. So before we start with the 7 pillars of to the passing the CIA exam, I'd just like to go quickly over the changes that are going to go in effect on January 1st, 2019 to the CIA exam for the English and then for the other languages later on. Of course, today's session is focused on the English exam. And for those of you who are looking to study in other languages, whether provided by PRC or not, we recommend that you can listen to this, but don't use it as the foundation for your preparation. Now, starting with the changes. The changes, of course, we're going to start with getting to know the new syllabus. And occasionally or every now and then, every 3-4 years, what the IIA does is that it has a body of knowledge that it asks about for the exam. What they do is they consolidate this body of knowledge. They add 5% to the content. They remove maybe around 5 or 10% to the content. They do some minor modifications here and there, and then they divide the content into the 3 parts. Of course, in the old past, it used to be 4 parts. Now it's 3, or it has been 3 for a while. So this is exactly what they did now. It's basically to bring the exams up to date with the current global practice, clarify the knowledge and skills that exam candidates must possess, create a greater alignment with the CIA syllabi and the IIA standards, refocus the content of Part 3 on the core knowledge and skills that internal auditors must possess to do their jobs. And this is what they've done for this particular exam. Now, the CIA exam is tested at 2 levels, either the basic level or the proficient level. For the basic level, candidates just retrieve relevant knowledge from memory and or demonstrate basic comprehension. For the proficient level candidates must apply these concepts or procedures and analyze, evaluate, make judgments, etc. Now, of course, in the past, they used to be referred to as awareness level and proficiency level. Now it's basic and proficient levels. They just changed some terminology. Now, there were some cosmetic changes to the part names. Part 1 used to be referred to as Internal Audit Basics. Now it's referred to as Essentials of Internal Auditing. Now, Part 1, the new content will focus primarily on the attribute standards of the professional, the IPPF, International Professional Practices Framework of the IIA. Now they're going to be focused on the series 1000, 1200, 1100, 1200, 1300, and Performance Standard 2100. All the remaining standards will be the focus of Part 2. Of course, in our opinion, this change was necessary because in the past, the old content, the advice was to study both parts together and then write the individual parts separately. Now we can be more confident that the parts are more or less segregated, so you can study Part 1 on its own, write its own exam, study Part 2 on its own, write its own exam. The content of Part 1. So this is the current content over here. Let me just get this pen. So this is the current content. It used to be mandatory guidance, internal control risk, and conducting internal audit engagement and tools. What happened is the following. This part has been divided into 4 new parts, or 4 new subsections, 4 new domains. So the new domain 1, Foundations of Internal Auditing, 15%, Independence and Objectivity, 15%, Proficiency and Due Professional Care, 18%, Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, 7%. These used to be covered under the mandatory guidance over here, 35 to 40%. Now they comprise approximately 30 and 25, approximately 55% of the new exam. Governance, risk management, and control. So what they did is they added the governance, this part here. Governance used to be covered in Part 3 in the previous edition. Now it's covered in Part 1. So governance, risk management, and control will comprise 35%. And fraud risks used to be covered in part 2. Now they are covered in this part of the exam. So this is the new outline for the part 1 of the exam. Conducting the internal audit, engagement tools and techniques now are part of, conducting the internal audit engagements, audit tools and techniques, now they're part of the part 2 of the new outline. So the new topics, of course, we can go over them with the outlines we will be sending you the PDFs after this session. Now the part 2, again, a cosmetic change to the name. It used to be called Internal Audit Practice. Now it's referred to as Practice of Internal Auditing. And part 2 will test the candidate's knowledge, skills, and abilities, particularly related to the performance standards, namely standards 2000, 2020, 2200, 2300, 2400, 2500, and 2600. And of course, current internal audit and practices. So part 2 used to be managing the internal audit. Managing the internal audit, managing the individual engagements, and fraud risks and controls. Now, of course, as we saw, this went to part 1 of the exam. And the new outline will be managing the internal audit activity, planning the engagement. Planning was part of the part 1, now it's part 2. Performing the engagement and communicating engagement results and monitoring, 20%, 20%, 40%, and 20%. Now, the part 3 changes are the interesting ones. The current part 3 is the internal audit knowledge element. The new part 3 is the business knowledge for internal auditing, again, some cosmetic change to the name. And there has been some changes to the content. Current content, or the previous as of 2018, was governance, which now moved to part 1. Now this is tested in part 1. Risk management also went to part 1. And organizational structure, business processes and risk, communication, management, leadership principles, IT continuity, business continuity, financial management, global business environments have been consolidated and divided to the following. You have business acumen, 35%. Information security, you have 25%. Information technology, 20%. And financial management, 20%. Now, of course, for those of you who are concerned about the accounting aspect or the accounting part of the CIA, it has always been a concern. And as we all know, internal auditing is not necessarily for accountants. So those of you who are non-accountants or who do not like the accounting, there isn't much to be concerned about. It's only 20% of one of the parts covered preliminary, primarily at the preliminary level or basic level of understanding. Now, when does the exam change take place? Now, of course, as we said, this is for the English exam. January 1st is the cutoff date. So January 1st, 2019, you will be doing only the revised exam, the outline we just saw. You have until December 31 to complete the exam on the current model. Should you be concerned? Definitely not, certainly not. And the reason is, if you were studying the old outline, the information itself did not change. Only 5 or 10% are they new. It's just the ordering of the information and what is tested where. So if you studied parts 1 and 2 and 3 on the old exam, studying parts 1 and 2 and 3 on the new exam, you just need to do a few modifications to what material was added. Otherwise, it's the allocation. Now, if you did pass any of the parts on the current edition, you will gain the same credit, or you will get the same credit for the new edition. So if you passed parts 1 and 2 on the old exam, you will get the credit for parts 1 and 2, and you'll only have to write part 3 of the new exam. We are now in August. We still have 5 months to go. You have plenty of time to study and write parts 1 and 2 or part 3 on the current edition. You don't necessarily have to panic and wait for the new exam. However, if you decide to wait for the new exam, to study and prepare for the new exam, we're very excited. Our material is out. So you can also prepared. This is the 2019 edition, so you can purchase it online and study for the 2019 edition starting now. With this, let's move on to the main core of the, well, okay, before we do that, there hasn't been any changes to the passing score. Passing score is still 600. The exam is scored, it's a scaled score exam. The score is between 250 and 750 with a passing score of 600. Now, what does that mean? We'll talk about this when we talk about the 7 pillars. The parts are still the same. Part 1 is still 125 questions, 150 minutes. Part 2 is 100 questions, 120 minutes. Part 3 is 100 questions, 120 minutes. Of course, why is Part 1 more than the rest of the parts? Part 1 includes test questions. What does that mean? You will get 25 questions on your Part 1 exam that are not graded. That will not count towards your grade. Which questions are these? You do not know. We do not know. Of course, our guess is that when you get a lot of questions on the exact same topic, and it's way beyond what you expected for that particular topic on the exam, these are probably the test questions. Which ones are the test and which ones are counted, you will not know. And that's what makes them good test questions for IIA grading and quality assurance purposes. Moving on to the 7 pillars. Of course, we are excited here that you joined us to learn how to pass this exam, and we're going to talk about the 7 pillars, the most important things you need to do to pass the CIA exam. It's doable, it's difficult. I'm sure you've heard from a lot of colleagues, friends that they didn't succeed. They've been doing it for a while. If you do what we're about to tell you, we guarantee that you will be through this exam before June 2019. It will take up to 10 months reasonably to prepare and write the exams. Some people, of course, do it less. Some people takes them more. Some people start and never end up finishing it. So we don't want you to be one of these. We want you to be one of those who become certified. This time next year, you should hopefully all be certified. Now, how do you get certified? Let's start with the first pillar. What's the first pillar? You have to want it. You have to want the exam. It's not, oh, I'd like to become a CIA. This is not enough for you to pass the CIA exam. Just saying, I wish I became a CIA or I want to become a CIA, that's not sufficient. You really have to want it. You know, when you want something, there's a will, there is a way. So your first step towards getting the exam is knowing that you really want it. And it's either because of your job, either because of your career, either because of the promotion, or for self-satisfaction, self-gratification, or just to tease your colleague who keeps on teasing you about being a CIA and you want to get back at them. That could be sufficient motivation for some of us to go out there and get the CIA exam. That, you know, if he did it or she did it, I can do it. So your first step is knowing that you really want it. And I have no doubt that anybody who has been through a university program, who has completed a bachelor's degree, I have no doubt that they can pass the CIA exam. So in other words, I presume each and every one of you have been through or have completed a bachelor's degree, and therefore each and every one of you is capable of doing it. And we're confident that it's a matter of a formula. You put the right resources in, you get the CIA out. You put the time and effort in, and you will get this certificate at the end of your exam. Now, pillar number 2, know thy challenge. You have to know the challenge of course, usually it's know thy enemy, but in this case, the CIA is not your enemy, it's the challenge. And to know the challenge, of course, we did speak briefly about it, but let's summarize or recap. 3 parts: essentials of internal auditing, practice of internal auditing, business knowledge for internal auditing, 125 questions, 100 questions, 100 questions. And this is what you will need to know. Now, of course, it's 2.5 hours for part 1, 2 hours for part 2, 2 hours for part 3. And if you do the math, it's around 120 minutes for 100 questions, so barely 1 minute, 12 seconds on average per question. What does that mean? That means you really have to know your stuff. You really have to know how to navigate quickly through the exam. And this is why we're here. This is why we're doing this session, to help you use certain methods
to go through the exam and pass it from your first attempt. Now, what's the passing score for the exam? As we said, it's a scale of 250 to 7. On a scale of 250 to 750, the passing grade is 600. What does a scaled scale mean? A scaled scale is used to even out changes in exam difficulties amongst various entrants. So if you sat for the exam 5 years ago and you sat for the exam today and you sit for the exam 10 years from now, if you sat with the average level of knowledge for an internal auditor, you would get the 600. So that's how they make it a fair exam. How much does the 600 translate into percentage points? We don't know. The IIA does not disclose. However, what does it mean to get a 600? If you get a difficult version of the exam, you might score 67% correct and get a 600. If you get a relatively easier version of the exam, you might score 71% to get a 600. So what the IIA does is that they have multiple versions of the exam, and each version they determine the scale on 600 of the passing for that particular version. So some people can pass with 65%, 67%. Some people need 71% or 72%. Almost certainly in excess of 75% you will pass. Below 65% you will probably not. Anywhere between 65 and 75% of the exam will depend on the difficulty of the exam. Of course, the IIA does not disclose this. Does not disclose its scaling. Does not disclose its scaling score scaling. But this is our guess. This is our estimate from experience. So you would say anywhere above 75, you're certainly gonna pass. You'll get something 600 or above. Anything lower than 65, it's likely you will not pass. Anywhere in between will depend on the difficulty of the exam. Does each question have, do questions have different weights? No, they do not. It's the entire edition. And this is an important fact which I'll emphasize later why it's important, but just know for now, this is important. All questions have equal weights. Now, pillar number 3 is the material you use. Of course, there's a lot of material out there. There are a lot of books out there. There are a lot of background books or background material out there that you can go through. Generally, you have to select what's best for you. Sometimes people or candidates prefer to study from books. Sometimes they prefer to study from review material. Sometimes they prefer to attend live classes, and sometimes they do an online review. Now, of course, we here at PRC would like to just go over our material. We do have a comprehensive set of materials for the exam. They are all you need to pass the exam, and they're comprised of manuals or review books, the online practice questions, the e-flashcards, and recently we introduced a virtual class, which we'll go over also later on. We'll brief you on our virtual classroom. Now, 4th pillar for the CIA exam is the plan. If you want to get there, so we said number 1, I want it. I really want it. Number 2 is knowing about it. Number 3 is what material to use. And number 4 would be to put a plan. Now, the challenge with the CIA, or any professional exam for that matter, is that it does require time. It does require studying. It does require reading. It does require preparing or going through previous exam questions or sample exam questions. Now, before you embark on this journey, you have to know that this would require a certain amount of hours. We'll go over the next slide and talk about the average number of hours. But before you start, does any one of you have a free time where they just sit there doing nothing? And before you answer, or you cannot answer directly, no. We all have our commitments that fill our 24 hours per day. We sleep, we eat, we socialize, we work, we attend to chores, we
have other commitments, etc. But our 24 hours as of now, they are booked, they are full, they are complete. Now, if we want to add a set number of hours to gain the CIA or to successfully pass the CIA exam, it means one of two things. Either we need to find 30-hour workdays. So instead of our days being 24 hours, we need to find 30-hour days. I doubt anyone has managed so far, unless you travel maybe to Pluto or to an outer planet. Or you have to substitute existing time. So you have to remove something from your current busy or current full schedule and add the CIA into it. And this would require planning. Some people decide to take out social life, some people decide to take out work, some people decide to take out family time, some people decide to take out leisure time or pleasure time. It's your call. Each and every one of you only knows what time they can sacrifice to put the CIA in place. And the most successful way to do that is to start by setting an exam target date. So what you would really want to do is set a date from now. When do you want to write the exam? People go around it in two ways. They either start studying and they say, okay, when I finish studying, I will set a date. Or the better and the right way to do it is to set a date from now and say, okay, my target will be to write the exam on January 2nd. And this is just immediately after they do or introduce the new changes. So let's say December or whenever. And then you schedule and you plan your time accordingly. We expect from our experience, from the candidates who have succeeded, from the feedback we get from candidates, we expect that this is an exam that requires approximately 500 to 600 hours of total preparation time. Okay, so you should expect anywhere between 500 and 600 hours on average. Can people do it with less hours? Yes. Do some people do it with more hours? Also, yes. It all depends on your individual background, your ability to grasp information. Now, the weekly study hours, we never recommend that you do 60, 70 hours per week studying for the CIA exam, at least not at the beginning. We always recommend that you pace yourself over time. And we believe anything around 20 hours per week is the reasonable study time for the CIA. Now, unless you're pressured to do it in a shorter period of time, try to allocate your time on 20 hours per week. And I don't like to put the hours per day because we all cannot study every day. Sometimes we're tired, sometimes we get circumstances. You don't want your plan to be so strict and rigid, because a strict or rigid plan or strict or rigid objective will likely put you off track. What you would want to do is you would want to put a reasonable objective, reasonable hours. 20 hours per week should be a reasonable time. So you might put an hour or two every day during the work week, maybe 10 hours per week during the work week, and maybe another 10 hours over the weekend. That's more reasonable towards successfully. Now, how do you put the hours? When we talk about the preparation, I'll tell you how to find the time or which times to study. Pillar number 5, preparation. Now, how do you prepare? Our recommended methodologies as follows. Of course, some people are stronger in certain areas and they require less time in others, but the generic methodology is as follows. One is to read the book. Go through the book. No matter how much information you already know, it's always recommended, if you do have the time, to go through the book. The book will include a lot of the standards, implementation guides, and the background content that will help you answer questions on the exam. Now, will questions show up exactly as they're stated in the book? Likely not. The book will only set you on track of how to think and what are the rules or guidelines you need to answer these questions. Practice as many multiple choice questions as possible. Now, for the CIA, our average platform contains almost 3,000 or plus questions for the CIA. So practice as many questions as you can, and of course, the more you practice, the better. Next would be to reattempt incorrect MCQs, they're incorrect questions. Do not attempt, or you don't have to repeat all the questions all the time. What's important is to repeat the questions that you have answered incorrectly on prior attempts. Reason: if you know something and you answered it correctly the first time, chances are you will always answer it correctly when you see that question, because you already know the answer and you already know why the answer is correct. So you already know how to choose the right answer for that particular question. But the problem with us and our memory is that we tend to answer questions incorrectly more often. So if we answer a question incorrectly the first time, chances are we will answer it incorrectly the second, third, and fourth time we see the question. So to avoid that, what you need to do is when you answer a question incorrectly or correctly, if you do have time, read all options and read the answers for all options, why each answer is correct or incorrect. This emphasizes the knowledge you've read in the books. And when you answer a question incorrectly, also read all 4 options. The answer on our platform, we tell you why each answer is incorrect. So you would want to read why your answer was incorrect, and you would want to read why is the correct answer correct. Now, of course, when you reattempt these questions, don't reattempt them within a short period from the first attempt. So if I attempt the question today and I get it incorrect, I don't want to reattempt it today or tomorrow or the day after. The longer I wait, the better it is. Now, if I can wait up to a week or 10 days, it's better. So reattempt your incorrect questions after 1 week or 10 days to allow time for you to have learned the reason. The reason why we're saying this, if you reattempt the same question consecutively or within a short period of time, chances are that you will memorize the questions, you will memorize the answer, you will answer correctly, but not because you understand the correct answer. You will answer correctly because you memorized the correct answer. We don't want you to do that. So do not attempt incorrect questions consecutively. Allow time. Of course, recommended to do a final review a few days before the exam. Focus on your areas of weakness. Focus on the information the topics you're always getting wrong, and focus on questions you're getting incorrectly. Do a mock exam a few days before your exam to test your final preparation. All these tools, of course, you will get the mock exam, the practice questions, and the ways to sort out the incorrect questions. You do get them on our platform and the platforms of other providers for that matter. Now, the study approach. The first would be to rest and reward. It's useless to sit behind your books or behind your computer for hours long, just studying. Your effectiveness begins to drop, your efficiency begins to drop. So the better way to approach this is to study a small chunk of the material, rest and reward yourself with watching a movie, going out, socializing with friends, etc. So don't spend consecutive hours. The shorter the study session, the more effective the learning becomes. So we don't want you to go there and sit 5 hours over the weekend doing nothing but studying. Over the weekend, you might do an hour or 2 in the morning, rest, do something, an hour in the afternoon, and then maybe an hour or 2 in the evening. Do not do continuous hours. They are not helpful. Shorter periods are more helpful and more effective. As we said, the second is short study sessions. Now, of course, our material is divided into study sessions, and each study session is self-contained with its own topic and its own questions. So you would read a few pages, and then you would solve their questions, and you would be ready to move on to the second study session. Now, all topics are equally important. We get a lot of questions. Which topics shall I focus on? As you saw in the outline, the exam is divided between various topics and each has its own percentage. So there is no one particular topic that you should focus on or you can focus on. Each topic, each page in our books, each question has an equal chance of showing up on, the topic of the question has an equal chance of showing up on your CIA exam. So you cannot ignore any section or any chapter. Some of you, especially in essay type questions in universities, we might skip half the book because we don't have time, read only half and go in and hope that, you know, the questions or the focus on this half. And for the CIA, it doesn't work. Each and every page, each and every topic has an equal chance of showing up on your exam. So you cannot afford to skip. However, having said that, you don't have to go in any particular order. So if you start topic 1 or study session 1, page 1, page 2, and you find it difficult, or you don't like this material, or you don't, you don't feel like studying this kind of material, it's okay, it's fine. You don't have to stop studying. Skip it, move on to a more, an easier or more a topic that you feel more comfortable with. As long as by the end, before you sit for the exam, you went through the entire book, you don't have to go in any particular order. In fact, if you do get stuck, my recommendation is that read it, even if you're not understanding anything, just read it once and keep it on the back burner, let it sleep on it, reattempt it a week or 10 days later, you will see that you are learning it. The way our brain works, if I read a page 10 times consecutively, I might find difficulty understanding it. But if I read it once today, even if I do not understand it today, and I sleep on it for a few days, and I attempt it a second time in 10 days or 1 week, I will understand it. So instead of reading it 3 or 4 times consecutively, read it twice over a period of time, and you will understand it. Our brains sort the information at night when we sleep. So when you read, the information gets in, it sticks, and it's sorted and assimilated, and you understand it after a good night's sleep. So that's why when they say sleep on it, that's why they tell you to sleep on it, because the second time you read it, you feel that you already know some of this information, or it's already in your brain, it's assimilated, so it makes a lot more sense. Of course, what you need to do is focus on your weaknesses. You don't have to read all topics equally. So if you read the first one, you skim through it, you solve the questions, you're scoring more than 90% on that study session, you don't have to reattempt it. Always focus on the areas where you're weak at. If you're scoring 30 or 40% on the studies on session 2, that's where you should spend more time. So you might spend 3 hours on the first session, maybe 7 or 8 hours on the second. It's better than spending time equally. Of course, always stay positive. Stay positive. Surround yourself with positive people. You will pass. You can pass. It's doable. You just have to know that you can do it. And of course, avoid negative peers. For the first exam that I did in my career, I did the CPA exam, and some of you might know it's relatively also a difficult exam. And I would go there and people tell me, are you crazy? Are you stupid? Don't you have anything in your brain? This is the most difficult exam anybody can go through. Who do you think yourself, who do you think you are, thinking that you can pass this exam? So-and-so, he had the highest GPA university, he never made it. So-and-so professor sat for the exam, passed 2 parts, failed 2 parts. So who do you think you are, knowing more information than your professor? In class, I was doing a live review for the CPA. My friend next to me, as soon as they put a question on the board, he'd answer it. He knows all the information. Halfway through the course, and of course I was stuck. I was lost. I was confused. I did not understand anything. Halfway through the course, he said, "Oh, I'm going on vacation. I need a rest. I need a break from the course." So he goes off, and of course I'm panicking because I think, "Oh my God, am I, too stupid compared to these guys? What's happening to me?" Eventually, I ended up getting the CPA. He never did. So what you really need to do is avoid negative peers, stay positive, and honestly surround yourselves either with people who are encouraging you, or just study it on your own. Don't, especially on social media groups, they're not very helpful, unless it's of course a positive peer group where they're helping you, encouraging you, pushing you forward. It's doable. Just surround yourself with the right people and do what you have to do. Pillar number 6, review and rest. Resting is very important for the before writing the exam. The exam is a time-sensitive, time-challenge exam. So what you really need to do is do a quick review before the exam and get a good night's sleep. Don't study overnight. Don't keep reading until the last minute before your exam. the knowledge on the exam is not memorization. You will not, if it's something that you did not stick 10 or 15 days before your exam, it will not stick the last hour before your exam. So what you would really want to do, and the CIA exam, it's real cases, it's case studies, it's case scenarios. So they'll give you a case and how you should respond. And this is something you should have understood, the standards, implementation guides, and the G tags before you're able to answer these questions. Once we've done that, we're on to the final pillar of the exam, which is the exam itself. And now let's talk about the methodology to pass this exam, to go through the questions of the exam. Your first step is we like to use the multiple pass approach. What does the multiple pass approach entail? Now, this exam, as we said, it's 100 questions or 125 questions in a limited set of time. You will not be penalized for incorrect questions. You will not be penalized for questions you did not answer. And each question has an equal weight. Therefore, on the exam, you're going to have several types of questions. You're going to have questions that might take you 30 seconds to attempt, and you're going to have questions that might require 3 minutes to attempt, so 180 seconds. And both a 30-second question and a 3-minute question have equal weight, have equal grades. So which is better, solving one 3-minute question or 6 30-second questions? Of course, the 6 questions, they're the same weight, right? So what you'd want to do is you would want to avoid attempting these 3-minute questions before you have completed all the easy short questions. I like to, visualize this as picking apples from an apple tree. What you normally start with these easy, accessible, short to reach apples before you go to that nice red apple on top that might require a ladder and time to get up and get hold of it. You would have accumulated 7 or 8 apples from the lower leaves or lower branches, and this is what you should do on the exam. You look at the first question, short and or easy. So short, you can see it's a short question. Easy, from your experience, you will know, once you've practiced enough questions, you will start picking up experience on what to expect from a question. So as soon as you look at it, you will know, oh, this question is talking about leases. I don't like leases, skip. Our advice for these longer and or difficult questions on your first attempt, immediately skip. Do not read, do not attempt, do not spend more than a second looking at the question. Short and or easy, solve or attempt. Long and or difficult, skip, immediately go next. Second question, short and or easy, attempt. Long and or difficult, skip, just go skip. For this approach to work, you should not even attempt a long or difficult question. You just have to skip it. Now, what this does is by the time you get through to the end of the exam, you would have likely solved 50% of the questions in 20 to 30% of the time. Because what you've done is you've solved the easy and or short questions, which require like the 20 or 30 seconds. So you've accumulated a good percentage of the exam questions for points. And those short and or easy questions, chances are you know them, they're easy, you're going to get them correct. So you built a part of your grades by doing that. Now you move to the end and you get 4 options at the end of the exam. First option, end the exam. Save that for now. Second option, show all questions. I don't want to see all questions. Third option, show marked questions. I don't want to see the marked questions. What I want to see are the unsolved questions. So let's assume it's a 100 question exam for parts 2 or 3. First pass, you might have solved 20 or 30 questions. You go again to the beginning and you show the unanswered questions. You do a second pass through the questions and you solve not all of them, the more difficult and or longer questions. You get to the end and you move back to the beginning. I personally do 5 or 6 of these passes in one exam. And this helps you because towards the end, what you will do is in two-thirds, if you've solved at least 2/3 or 80% of the exam in 60, 70% of the time. So you will have plenty of time for those long, difficult questions. You might have 10 to 15 questions on the exam that require on average 2 or 3 minutes. So imagine if you start your exam, if the exam starts with these 10 or 15 questions, and after half an hour, you look at the exam, you're 25% through the time, and you've only solved 10 questions. What will happen to you? You'll panic, you'll be demotivated, and you will go through the remaining of the questions not focusing. Even though they're the easier questions, they're the ones that could give you points. And an easier question, you have a higher chance of answering correctly, whereas a difficult question, you have a less chance of answering correctly. So why spend time on a difficult question? Spend 3 minutes on a question, and you might answer it correctly 50%, and waste 6 other questions that you have a 90% chance of answering them correctly. And at the end, they give you the same point score on the exam. So always attempt the easier questions first before attempting the more difficult questions. If you end up not having time for those long, difficult questions, fine, just guess them, or put them all in the same A or B or C or D. You'll get 25% chance you'll get them correct. Now, of course, but save the guessing until when you have no other option. I'm going to tell you a secret here. Of course, examiners do not like it when I do say it. In one of the exams, and I'm not going to say, I mean, one of the certifications, it was a 3-hour exam, and there were 110 multiple choice questions. 3 parts of the exam, I ended up doing 70 to 80% of the questions in the first 1.5 hours of the exam. And I just put the remainder of all the questions in one answer, and I passed the exam in 3 different parts. So in other words, this method works. Focus on short and or easy questions. Now, the second strategy is, one more thing. If you do attempt a long and or difficult question, do not skip it, because you've already wasted time on it. If you start reading the question, then you realize it's long and or difficult, don't skip it. This method will not work. Attempt it, answer it. You can mark it to come back to it later, or you can just answer it as best as you can and move on. Now, second, read all options. And why do we say all with a lot of L's? Sometimes you read the question and you read the first answer or the first option, and you say, oh, this looks like A, and you answer A and you move on. Well, guess what? The question could have an except. The question could have a not. So all the following are correct except for. Which of the following is not? And you would have missed this word. And or which of the following is the best course? So sometimes you might have 2 correct answers, but which is better to do? So that's why you need to read all options and choose the best, or choose the correct answer amongst all options. Emphasize keywords, not, except, least, most, etc. Generally speaking, duplicates are wrong. So if you get 2 answers that are the same, chances are they're both wrong. If you get 2 answers that are the opposite, usually one of them is correct. For example, in financial accounting, they tell you unearned revenues are an asset, a current asset, a liability, or equity. Now, asset and current asset, they are 2 different options, but they're the same thing technically, because an asset can be a current asset, and a current asset is also an asset. So they can't be both right. And therefore, both are eliminated immediately as wrong options. And if you're guessing, it's between the 2, of course, it's a current liability, but if you're guessing between the 2, you have a 50-50 chance of guessing correctly. As we said, answer all questions, even if you have to guess them. So there are no penalties for not answering questions. Guess if you have to. Do not change your answers. And why am I saying this? Most people, they go from incorrect to correct. Sorry. Most people, 90% of people go from correct to incorrect. And I always say this example, I learned it the hard way. Back in college, I used to help my friends. They used, sometimes I don't even know the people. They just sit beside me and they copy my paper, I never minded. Now, one of the exams, I completed the answers, and my friend copied my answers. And he just submitted his paper and left. After he left, I changed a few answers, and another friend copied the changes I did, and he submitted his paper and left. Later on, I did change some more. Now, of course, the first one got 98, the second one got 92, I got 88. That's what I learned, that changing your answers is not a good thing. Your first impressions are almost always correct, unless you're 100% sure that you selected the wrong answer in a previous attempt. Do not change your answer. And in general, I don't recommend you review the questions. You might review the ones you marked. I don't recommend you review an answer. Once you've answered the questions, just move on. Unless, of course, you are 100% sure and you have time. Not many people end up having time. Now, of course, those who pass, almost everybody who I know passed the CIA exam, they finished the questions comfortably within the time allowed. When you know it, you answer it quickly. When you have to think and remember, that's when you're not sure, and that's when you're probably not passed. So if you finish on time or before time, chances are you will pass. And of course, as we said, stay positive during the exam. It's normal to find difficult questions. It's normal to find challenging questions. It's normal to see questions you've never heard of before. Just always stay positive. A positive attitude will help you answer correctly. So even if you find 5 or 10 questions which you've never seen before or you've never heard of before, stay positive. It won't help you if you panic. It won't help you if you get stressed. Now, a few more techniques before we move on. Elimination. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the CIA exam or with examples of preparing for the exam, you get a lot of these questions on the exam. So which of the following is true or a number or whatever, and you'd get 4 different options. And then you would get the answers as combinations of these options. Whenever you see one of these questions on the exam, of course, we selected a very easy question. However, of course, and you'll never see this question on your exam, right? But what I want to demonstrate is the technique. And what I want to do here is I want to slow down, because this is worth 30 minutes savings on your exam. Now, when you see one of these questions, your starting point should be to count how many ones are there in the option. There are 3 ones in the option. How many 2s? 1, 2, 3. There are 3 2s in the options. How many 3s? 1, 2, 2 3s. How many 4s? 1, 2, 2 4s. So we have 3 1s, 3 2s, 2 3s, and 2 4s. We start with the one that's repeated twice. In this case, it would be either the 3 or the 4. So I'd go back and read the question, or now I read the question. Which of the following is a number? And we said we're going to start with 3 or 4. We read number 3. 3 is not a number. 3 is a letter. Now, because 3 is a letter, answer B and answer C are incorrect because they do include 3. We can eliminate both these options. Now we are deciding between options A and options D. Now, what's common between A and D? 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 are correct. I don't need to read them. I only now need to read option 4. If 4 is a number, the answer is D. If 4 is not a number, the answer is A. So I read 4, it's a 0, it's a number, so the answer is D. How many options did we read? 2. And we got to the right answer. Now, why does this save time on the exam? On the exam, these are actual sentences. 2 sentences maybe per option, maybe 3 sentences per option. If each sentence takes us 10 seconds or 15 seconds to read, you will be saving 20 seconds by not reading 2 options. 20 seconds or 10 or 15 seconds per question. And you get approximately 30 or 40 of these questions on your parts 1 and 2. So multiply 40 by 20 seconds. So approximately 12 or 13 minutes on your exam. You save time by doing this methodology. Let's repeat the methodology again. This time we're going to do a different one. And you'll see that also with 2 attempts, we'll be able to solve it. So we have 3 1s, 3 2s, 2 3s, and 2 4s. This time we decided to start with 4. So which of the following is a number? And we read 4. 4 is a number. So the answer is either C or D. 1 and 2 are out. We cross them out because 4 is only present in C and D. Now, is there anything in common between between C and D? No. So we can choose any one of these, 1, 2, or 3. We read 1. 1 is a number. The answer is D. 1 is not a number. The answer is C. Now, let's re-demonstrate this with a real, or not a real, with a longer question, and you'll see why this saves you time. Use the technique. So you should have answered this by now. Without solving all these formulas. Now let's look at the method. Let's reapply the method. 1 is repeated 3 times. 2 is repeated 3 times. 3 is repeated twice. 4 is repeated twice. We can select 3 or 4. 4 looks shorter. It's 3 numbers. So we start adding 3, 9, and 9. That's 21. So because it's 21, it cannot equal 100. 4 is wrong. We cross out C, we cross out D. So the answer is either A or B. 1 and 2 are common between A and B, so we only need to read 3. 10 plus 52 plus 24 plus 16 is 40 and 92 and 102. So 3 is not 100. 3 is wrong. So the answer is A. Now notice, we only had to do 2 formulas. We did not have to go through all 4 options. And of course, remember, you will never see a question of this method of this type on the CIA exam, but it's with formulas and calculations. But you will have, this is just to demonstrate the technique to answer these questions. You will see a case with 4 options or 4 scenarios, and you want to say which is correct or which is not correct. Instead of having to read all 4 of them, this method will help you solve most of these questions by reading only 2 options. Now, finally, I cannot stress enough, stay positive and pass. Before we open the floor up for our questions and answers session, I just want to go through a live online course. We've launched the first virtual live online class for the CIA in the world, and we're launching it for the 2019 edition in September. So what this does is you will have, the experience will be similar to this. In fact, we'll be in the same studio over here, and you will have the slides. You will get a participant guide to follow with us. You will get the chance to ask questions regularly throughout the course. And of course, we have the time to go through, re-explain or explain with making notes on the screen, etc. What are the advantages? It's the most cost-effective and affordable way to study for the exam, and you can attend it from the convenience of your own home, office, workplace, coffee shop, wherever you are. You will be able to attend the course. For those of you who are not able to attend, the sessions will be recorded and they will be uploaded to your platform. You can view them and you can always ask us questions. Of course, more information about it, you can go through to our website and go to the CIA Live online course page. Our part 1 will start on September 10th, and our part 2 will start on January 28th for the part 2 exam. Okay, so I do see that you guys are happy with what we've introduced. We hope it was beneficial. We hope to see you all CIAs in the near future. Please let us know if there's anything we can support, help, or assist with. Our goal is to help you pass the CIA exam, and hopefully in as little as 6 to 8 months, you'll all be certified. Thank you very much for joining, and good luck in your preparation, or all the best in your preparation.